Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a subscriber ask me a question yesterday that I thought was really an interesting topic to cover for you guys. And he asked me, he said, hey, Mark Rippetoe, I guess it's Rippetoe, people get mad when I pronounce it incorrectly. Mark Rippetoe has said that squats make noobs' arms grow. Is there any truth to this, and does this continue to work for people who are advanced lifters and everything else? It's a good question. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing. Work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. All right, there's a lot of factors involved with this. Is there a fair amount of anecdotal evidence and even logical reasons to suggest that squats make noobs' arms grow? Yeah, there actually is. There actually is. Now, what I want to make clear here is that you're not going to build 18-inch arms by doing squats. All right, let's get that out of the way right up front. No reasonable person is suggesting to anyone out there that you will maximize your arm development or reach anything even remotely close to your drug-free genetic arm potential by doing squats. So let's get that out of the way. It will not happen. However, what has been noticed for years and years observing young men in weight rooms. Again, we're talking going all the way back to like the 70s and 80s. So we're talking a long time ago. A lot of strength coaches noted that when high school football players or younger guys, who were just maybe even freshmen in high school who were wanting to go play football, and they decided to bulk them up in the weight room, and they put them on like the 20 rep squat programs, where they would have them come in and focus on doing the 20 rep squats, which again is usually with like a 10 rep max. So these guys were grinding out rest pause squats like 3 days a week. And they would put them on a gallon of milk a day so that they were gaining weight from that on top of it. And you don't necessarily get fat from that if you're young and active and training and everything else and you're skinny and need to gain weight. That they noticed that their arm measurements went up substantially, right? Their arm measurements went up substantially. What people need to remember is that when you're talking about big compound movements, and it doesn't have to be just a squat, we could be talking about the deadlift, we could be talking about the standing press or the push press or the power clean. What people need to remember is that these big exercises do load your entire body. In other words, even a deadlift technically causes some contraction, a reasonable amount of stimulation of every single muscle in your entire body if you were to hook an EMG up to it. And I do mean your biceps, I do mean your rear delts. I mean every muscle in your skeletal structure, all your skeletal muscle gets stimulated to some extent by these big exercises. Now, the difference here is that in many cases, is it enough stimulation to disrupt the homeostasis in your body? Obviously not. A guy who's already got 2 years of solid training under his belt, who hasn't either been doing, say, the squat or the deadlift, but he has been, training his upper body, maybe his legs to some extent. If he starts squatting and deadlifting heavy, he may not actually see any measurable change in his upper body mass as a result of it, meaning his arms may not actually grow as a result of it. Because it's adding stress, but it may not be enough additional stress to disrupt the homeostasis. Because now, once you've been training a muscle a couple of years, actually really training it, it actually becomes a lot more difficult to stimulate new growth. That a very low amount of training in that muscle won't cause it to adapt any further. It actually your training threshold, your minimum effective volume to cause any muscle to grow, increases the larger that muscle gets and the longer you've been training. And I think that's obvious to anyone who's been lifting for a while. I don't think anyone who's been training for a few years is going to disagree with that point. We all know it's true. We've seen it ourselves. Before you even go look at the data and the research where the experts say, that's true personally if you've been lifting, because you've experienced it firsthand and you've watched everyone around you who trains experience the same thing. It requires more work, more progression, more progressive overload, but also more total training volume, and that can include the weight on the bar as part of that. In other words, you need more growth stimulation to get a muscle to continue to grow. You've got to be able to disrupt that homeostasis that it's used to get an adaptation. But noob lifters, everything makes them grow. Everything makes them grow. If you take someone who's totally sedentary, completely sedentary, and you put them on a bicycle, they will actually gain a small amount of muscle through their body from riding a bicycle. Right? It won't be a lot, but it disrupts their homeostasis, and they actually do need some structural adaptations to deal with this new activity. But that's going to be very short-lived, and within a very short period of time, they won't gain that little half ounce of muscle that they gain from doing it through their whole body, particularly their legs. Well, squats do cause an overall growth stimulus in the entire body. They do. For someone who hasn't been training their arms at all, just the bracing and the load and everything from the squat, and including the whole disruption of the muscles throughout your body. So yes, this does happen. This does happen. And when you combine that with the fact that most novice lifters, particularly skinny young men who are put on any sort of bulking calories, what do we know when we look at all the research out there? Fat people have more muscle than skinny people. Overeating causes you to gain muscle even if you don't touch a weight. In other words, every single muscle in your body, if you're consuming enough total food to gain body fat, pretty much every muscle in your body is growing as a result of the anabolic stimulus of the food. Right? Fat people gain muscle from bulk. Fat people are technically on a bulk, like we would think of it, and they are gaining muscle as a result of getting fat. The problem is that they're gaining fat at a much, much faster rate than they're gaining muscle. Right? I mean, that's the point. And when I mean, it could literally be 5 to 1. In other words, that person might gain 50 pounds of fat and only gain 10 pounds of muscle if they're really, really, really lucky. And it's probably closer to 3 to 5 pounds of muscle that they've gained. But they are gaining muscle from the overeating. Overeating, even without exercise, just like anabolics without exercise, we know puts muscle on you. And actually through a similar pathway in the body, right? Overeating food does produce some of the exact same biological effects in your muscle tissue that drugs do, that anabolic drugs do. It's just not as strong of a signal, and it tends to make your fat grow too, whereas the drugs don't. It tends to make your fat grow a lot more than it does your muscles, depending upon how big your caloric surplus is. So when you factor that in, if you take a rank novice or someone fairly new to training and you put them under a heavy barbell and you have them start squatting heavy 3 times a week with progressive overload, and you have them eating enough total calories and protein to be gaining weight and to be gaining muscle, yeah, all their muscles are going to grow for a while. For a while. I'm not saying that after a year of doing this, you're still going to be seeing any arm gains, because you probably won't at that point. But for the first few months, are they going to gain muscle in their biceps and triceps from doing this? Yeah, they are going to gain some. And yeah, there have been plenty of cases of coaches noticing like an inch of arm growth in some of these young men doing this. Some of it's fat, but obviously some of it's muscle. And if you were to go test them, you were to take a young man and test their bicep strength on a machine before they started doing this, and then have them squat heavy and make a lot of progress and put on 10 pounds of body weight over the next 3 months, yes, their bicep strength will have gone up measurably, and they will have gained a small amount of bicep muscle. They will. But realistically speaking, would they gain maximum muscle in their arms? No, they won't. If this person probably did some chin-ups or pull-ups and curls on top of the squats, their biceps would grow quite a bit faster. Right? They would grow faster than just from the squats, and that's the point that needs to be made. When we say that these different things will cause a novice lifter to gain muscle, it doesn't mean that they're going to gain anywhere near the most muscle that they could. And that's the difference here. So it's a true statement, and it's been observed for decades by coaches, right, who coach these young men. It's been noted for decades. It's been observed over and over and over. Yeah, there is going to be some growth there. It's not going to be maximum growth. In other words, if you want big arms, you probably do need to actually train your arms. The squat is not going to give you, 17 or 18 inch arms. Let's just be realistic here. All right, let's be realistic here. It might if you bulk really fat while doing it, but you know they're going to be fat ceps. They're not going to be biceps. So you guys get the idea. Yeah, there is actually truth to this, and it's multifold in nature. It has to do with both the growth stimulus systematically, particularly for people who start out weak and small, combined with the caloric surplus. Yeah, you're getting two different stimulus. It will cause their arms to grow. But we need to make a note here that yes, their arms would grow faster if they actually trained them on top of it. So it's not like, oh, that we're going to see the best possible results from doing this, because you won't, but it is adding to the stimulation. And yeah, they will probably gain more muscle by doing the squats instead of just arm work. But it won't be a dramatically larger difference there. It's not like it's going to be a massive difference. And that's what we need to understand there, because it isn't going to be direct stimulation. It's more indirect. So it's not quite the same thing. It's not going to give the same effect. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.